And students in grades 3, 6, 9, and 12 get tested every year across the province. They do standardized testing called CRTs, and they're supposed to be checking to make sure that students are hitting the right milestones in literacy and numeracy across the province. But of course, kids fear these kinds of tests, teachers stress about them, and lots of parents are not really fans of them either. Now there's a new report calling into question the value of CRT testing, and the authors of the report are calling for a national review of standardized tests. Sébastien Despre is an Action Canada Fellow and PhD candidate at Memorial University and part of the task force on standardized testing, and he speaks with our Joanne Dooley.
Mr. Despre, tell us about your report. What did you look at?
We were invited to look at whether or not Canada has the education systems it needs to meet the societal and economic challenges of the future. So we looked at standardized testing and how its role in the Canadian education systems as an accountability measure.
And what were your conclusions?
Well, we came to the conclusion that a review of the current systems is urgent. We looked at how standardized testing can affect the classroom experience of students, and we looked at the different considerations that must be taken into account to see whether or not standardized testing is worth the unintended effects that it may have. So, for instance, standardized testing is a significant investment in terms of time. Time's devoted to test preparation, to teaching test-taking skills, to drills, writing practice tests, the writing of the tests themselves, the presentation of the results to students months later. All of this can potentially take away from other pursuits. And we know that education is a very time-sensitive endeavor. We only have half of the year, in essence, once all the weekends and holidays are taken into account, to have an impact on students.
What does that do to life in the classroom if you're trying to get in all this, as you say, practice and imitation exams and all of this business? What does it do to the rest of the life in the classroom?
Well, obviously, standardized tests can, for that reason, can have an impact on the very curricula they're meant to measure. One of the ways this can happen, for instance, is that since these tests can have a real impact on young children's future successes and life chances, there's a tendency for teachers to spend classroom time teaching what teachers believe will be on the tests. This can translate into a narrowing of the curriculum within these given subject areas. And the tests focus specifically on literacy and numeracy. So it establishes a hierarchy of subjects. Literacy and numeracy are just a very small subset of the topics prescribed by our provincial curricula. And that means that the testing systems are leaving a full range of objectives completely unaddressed.
So would there be other subjects then that you would feel that would be under-taught, perhaps, during the years when the standardized testing is taking place?
Well, it's been shown that standardized testing can have a negative impact on all other subjects. So, for instance, the teaching of music, of the arts, of social sciences and humanities takes a back seat to these what are called core subjects. But this hierarchy of subjects privileges some students but puts all other students, the students who would not typically do as well on these specific two, at a higher risk. We also know that standardized testing focuses on average performers. So that means that higher performing students and lower performing students are left behind. They penalize students who think in non-standard ways, and they're linked to higher dropout rates. So the students that are most likely to fail or most likely to drop out are actually pushed out of the system by these measures intended to make our education systems better.
So what would be the alternative then to standardized testing?
Well, standardized testing is a top-down model. It's a top-down model by excellence. It looks at the system in terms of how students are progressing or not in terms of these very specific fields. But top-down models are not the only models that are available to us. For instance, a lot of jurisdictions in Canada use interviews with students, with parents, with teachers, with higher administration at schools to assess whether or not the system is performing according to how it should be. These are really good tools that don't have the same potentially negative consequences on students and their learning.
Now, you mentioned at the outset that you believe it's urgent to review standardized testing. How urgent?
Well, it's becoming more and more urgent as standardized testing has been put in place for about 20 years in most Canadian jurisdictions. And nothing has been done yet to see whether or not standardized testing is having the positive impact that it should and is hoped to have.
How hopeful do you feel that this report is going to prompt the review that you're looking for?
There is currently a lot of attention being played on the importance of the higher level thinking skills. Character education, citizenship, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, creativity. They're all key words in 21st century learning. Standardized testing does not represent these key aspirations that we have for our systems. We know that standardized testing can interfere with the positive classroom atmosphere that we want for our classes. We know that standardized testing can undermine the intrinsic value of learning and that they're linked to lower levels of engagement. So student engagement is becoming more and more important to administrators, to policymakers across the country, and we are thinking that our report really stands a chance at getting a review done because of this concern, this very important concern that these measures may not be actually helping us on these goals of ours.
Mr. Despre, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Joanne.
That is Sébastien Despre. He's an Action Canada Fellow and a PhD candidate at Memorial University. Action Canada is a public policy and leadership development program for emerging Canadian leaders.